Tom, the market for backup and recovery continues to transform into data protection to emphasize the security aspects of these platforms. We've seen this at event after event and presentation after presentation. It now means that these companies are making big moves to turn the corner and to become more critical security focused components of enterprise IT. Consolidation is also a big theme in this market, with there being several blockbuster acquisitions, as well as a big IPO and some new advances designed to focus on how these companies will work in security with data regulations and so on. Tell us a little bit more about the transformation of data protection into security.
I think it's fascinating because when you think about it, backup and recovery, it's just, okay, data got lost or destroyed, and we just need to bring it back, right? Well, I used to do this for a living many, many moons ago. I'll tell you how long ago it was. Tape was the primary way that we back things up. That's actually not a spoiler. Like, we still back things up on tape, but like, it was deleted files, right? And the other day I had to help somebody find a deleted file in Google Drive, and it was just as easy as going into the trash can and undeleting it. Now, the majority of destruction of data actually comes from security incidents, right? Crypto lockers and files that have been deleted or removed or what have you. And so backup companies have had to start getting really creative with the way that they do this. And I'm thrilled, right? Because now, like, I have a reason to want to use a platform to do this, because when you notice that things are starting to get encrypted and you didn't do it, you need to figure out how to restore that data, because the rule, and I hope that people out there are listening, the rule is you don't pay, because it's like responding to a spam email. As soon as you do, you've provided yourself as a bigger target, right? So the big acquisition, I think, that kind of colored this whole thing happened back in February. Cohesity announced that they were going to be buying Veritas's Net Backup and Alta Solutions. And that was like, you feel those little earthquakes sometimes in the industry. Obviously, the stories that we've covered so far have been very, very big, because the dollar amounts attached to them have been very, very big. And for everybody else, is like, oh, well, there's no big thing that happens in my industry. This was, right? Cohesity is basically staking their claim. We are going to be the company when it comes to data protection. And that kind of kicked off a bunch of other things, because that market is very close to each other, right? I think the biggest thing was that Rubrik said that they were going to be filing an IPO in April, and they did. They went public, and it created a lot of resources that were out there, right? And then you look at the moves that Commvault made. I mean, it was like a week after the IPO announcement from Rubrik, and they said that they were going to be buying Appranix. And then they went and bought Clumio in September. So that was two other big acquisitions. And one could argue acquisitions don't go quickly, right? Like, there has to be discussions and things going on. But the fact that all of these discussions happened in a calendar year tells me that these things were kind of planned out. Like, people saw that they needed to take that big step up in order to be a bigger part of the security community. Back in August, we saw that Veeam actually had overtaken Veritas as the leader by market share. Veeam is a company that we have talked about a lot in the data protection space, but Veeam has always kind of felt like a backup company, right? They have been more closely aligned with companies like VMware. That's not to say that they were super aligned with it, because we found out after all the things going on with VMware by Broadcom, they were looking at adding Proxmox support. So that kind of even more closely tied them to the virtualization and server market. And then they went and bought Alcyon in September. And so you're starting to see those shifts again, right? We need to have more of a security presence. We need to be more focused on the data protection. And so then Cisco sold off their stake in Rubrik in October. Any other time, that might be an alarm bell that's getting raised, right? Like, oh, wow, big investors decided that they don't want anything to do with this company anymore. I don't think that's the case here. I think what happened is Cisco looked at the mountain of money that Rubrik made on their IPO and said, we could go buy a new car. Like, that would be awesome. Well, whatever the enterprise equivalent of that is. But then Commvault Shift happened. And Stephen, you were there in London for Commvault Shift. So jealous, by the way. You got to go eat such amazing British food and enjoy wonderful British weather. But you also got to hear about things like Cloud Rewind and cyber resilience. And I was there doing some of the live blogging of the show as the news was coming out. And you could tell just the atmosphere was palpable. Commvault isn't a backup company. They are a data protection company. We are securing the data in the cloud. We are making sure that it doesn't get stolen or misused. And if it does get destroyed, it can be quickly recovered. Like the dwell time between detection of an event and restoration of that invalidates any kind of business proposal, right? It's going to the point where the attackers have to be so subtle about what they're doing as to effectively be invisible, but that lengthens their timelines, which also means it raises their opportunities to be discovered and ejected. And then back in November, just a month after Commvault Shift, they announced Backtrack, which is another piece of that portfolio. So when you look at the way that these companies are starting to position themselves, and let's be fair, over last year, I kind of had a tiff with Mr. Backup, Curtis Preston, about how I thought that the backup and recovery people really should be part of the security team. And of course, Mr. Backup came rolling in and said, no, 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 that's not what we're going to do. And then look at where we're at in 2024. You've got data protection is an integral part of what security is. They're working more closely together than they ever have in their whole life. And I'm here for it because it means that we're starting to have a unified view of the way that data needs to be saved. It needs to be protected. It needs to be hidden from attackers who can use it for nefarious purposes. So, bravo to the industry for waking up and recognizing that. Yeah, consolidation always kind of makes people wonder what's going on. But I'll say this, coming from someone who has a background in security, I would rather work with a bunch of larger companies that have an integrated story than work with a bunch of small tool vendors who aren't quite sure what they want to put out yet.